Hello, my name's Garavavati and I'm here with the chair of the London Buddhist Centre, Suryagupta. We're very good friends, Suryagupta and I. We work together. Suryagupta's been the chair at the London Buddhist Centre for about the last, is it 2 years now?
2.5 years.
Two and a half years. And we wanted to do a special event for our YouTube audience where I'm in conversation with Suryagupta, talking about how to practice, particularly at this time of year, can bring up different things for different people, and also in spite of the global situation with COVID as well. I wanted to ask Suryagupta about her personal practice and particularly how she maintains a joyful mind. That's really what I wanted to explore with Suryagupta in practice, but also outside of meditation practice. So shall we launch in?
Let's have a go.
Okay. So Suryagupta, I know you live a full life. You're chair of the London Buddhist Centre, you've got a son, you're very engaged with your family as well. You've got lots of interests, you've got a creative life. So, and with everything that's been happening, it's easy to get overwhelmed or to go into despair. But you are adamant about enjoying your life. Quite often you'll say to me, I'm determined to enjoy my life. And I find that really, really inspiring. And I wondered if you could just tell people, why is it important to cultivate a joyful mind? And how does it relate to Buddhist teachings?
Yeah, I was quite interested in that statement that you've heard me say, that I'm determined to enjoy my life. I think for me that came from quite early experiences in meditation and Buddhism, and even before that. I definitely grew up in a context that wasn't easy, that had racism and poverty and very aesthetically unpleasing place, quite a rough area, East End of London. And so my reality was actually one that I didn't enjoy a lot of the time. I did enjoy I had a little inner life though, I read a lot. And so that I would escape there. And really from an early age, I thought I want to see if it's possible. Is this it? Is this reality that I'm experiencing? Is this all there is? And is it possible to have a life that is enjoyable and fulfilling? I experienced it when I escaped, in literature and things like that. But actually, what about my external life? So for me, it was an early question that I had. And it became quite pivotal at a certain point when I was searching for Buddhism, not for Buddhism, actively searching for some answers, and I found Buddhism. And I remember my first retreat, my first weekend introductory beginners, retreat. And like most people, I started meditating, mindfulness of breathing, and couldn't really concentrate. Is this going to work for me? Loads of stuff going on in my head because I was having to make some tricky decisions in my life at the time. And I wasn't, the environment, people were very friendly, so I really liked that. People were very friendly. The other Buddhists on the retreat were friendly. But, a lot of it was unfamiliar. Like the shrines was unfamiliar, people's names, the sort of Sanskrit names were unfamiliar. So I was there and I was just going along with the program. And but it was a very final meditation of the whole weekend. And it wasn't nothing was conscious. I was sort of, working with my mind in the way that I had, like distractions. But then at a certain point in this meditation, they all just fell away. All the noise, all the chatter, all the sort of conflicts within myself, all the tension in myself just fell away. And I wasn't even aware that was happening. I just found myself in a completely different experience, which was deeply peaceful, contented. I felt at home in my body, at home with myself, really at home in the world. And it was almost like there was emerged in me a kind of deep smile, and a smile that I recognized. It was very interesting. I thought, I know this feeling. And yet I couldn't pinpoint when I'd had it before, necessarily. And it was just, deeply, it was also very spacious. My mind also felt very clear. And at that point, I heard the sound of a bird. And it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. It felt like at the time, it felt like me and the bird were in deep communication with each other. And it just landed really deeply, and I just felt like, yeah, this is possible. And what this was you could call it joy, you could call it happiness, you could call it contentment, you could call it peace, but it was possible. And what was interesting, when I emerged from the meditation, I thought, well, I've still got the difficult decision I've got to make when I get back. Yeah. I've still got the other things going on in my life, but I also have this. And I also know it's possible to have, well, in a way, possible to have various realities. You know, there was my external reality, which was all its ups and downs and challenges and tensions. And then there was this new reality I was discovering that I cultivated through meditation and through the conditions. And somehow or other, I knew when I got back, because I'd been having to make a decision about a job. I'd been offered a job, and I really didn't want to do it. And it was a job that was, you know, high status, lots of money, sought after. I'd worked hard for that job. I sort of put all this energy into it, and then I was offered it. But a big part of me was like, no, I don't want to do this. Gosh. And it was really difficult because I had, like, you know, my family's expectations, I thought, and friends, and going, well, you know. So, but somehow or other, when I got back, because I'd done what you normally do when you've got a dilemma, you do the pros and cons, you know, all the reasons you should do it, all the reasons you shouldn't, and you get people's opinions, and you still don't often know what to do. But actually, after this experience, I was completely confident about making that decision to not do the job.
So you decided not to do it?
I decided not to do it.
Right.
And somehow or other, this experience I had, this kind of deep contentment, gave me that confidence. Because I knew somehow that, you know, that the external world and the job and the details of my life were not the only reality. I also knew that there was a reservoir, if you like, within me of spaciousness and contentment and positivity and connection that I could cultivate that would actually enable me to deal with whatever was going on in my life. So for me, that was a really pivotal moment, and I felt like it's my birthright somehow to cultivate this, to discover it, to explore it, so that I can navigate the world with a lot more perspective, a lot more confidence. Joy, resilience. I mean, joy is just one positive emotion, and there's lots of them, but it felt like this was a space I could cultivate to respond positively and creatively and constructively to the situations I was in that I didn't have before. It felt before, I was always trying to make decisions on the surface of things, you know, based on what was in front of me and based on what other people said, based on expectations, and suddenly I had a whole new perspective to bring. So having a positive mind is very important to me. And I think the Buddha is a very fantastic example, because when I encountered the Buddha story, you know, he sort of, he had this quest, before he became a Buddha, he had these questions, how to deal with old age, sickness and death, which really boil down to how to deal with change, uncertainty, things that you can't control, and loss. That's really what it boils down to. And he went on this search, and he was successful. You know, I love the fact that he was successful at this search. He had lots of trials and tribulations and all of that along the way, but he was successful. And then he taught for like 40 plus years afterwards, and died a peaceful death. And in the interim, created a revolution in India and Asia, whereby people could find a way to discover the truth of themselves. And that, for me, I'd grown up with inspirational, you know, examples like Martin Luther King, who, you know, I could see he had such a crucial message for the world and for me, and yet his death was violent. So for me to encounter an example of somebody who created a spiritual and social revolution and had a happy, contented, you know, existence, and express that to others, the possibility of that. That was the thing that really made me think, yes, that's what I'm going to do. And it's not easy, of course. We know it's not easy. I mean, you know, I was saying to my sister today, do you think I've got a joyful mind?
What did she say?
She's like, that's a good question. No, I don't think so. But she did say I had a positive one.
Oh, okay.
And I thought, well, that's fair enough. because as I said, joy is just one positive emotion.
Yes,
You know, a positive mind can be a clear mind. It can be it can be courageous.
Yeah.
It can be calm, stable. You know, there's all these qualities that you can cultivate, and joy is one of them. So sometimes I have a joyful mind, but I wouldn't say all the time. But I do strive to have a positive, constructive mind at all times, if I can. Yeah.
And as well as thinking clarity, what strikes me about you is you're very clear thinking. And I think the two comes, joy and clarity, you wouldn't always put them together, but I think they do come together, don't they?
How do you think they come together?
Oh, what? I thought you might say something about that.
Well, I'm interested. You just said that. That's interesting.
Well, just how they mutually augment each other. When we've got when our mind is happy, and you're talking about having a bigger perspective, there's a clarity that comes with that.
Yeah. So for me, just going back to that experience, it was in almost all the kind of stuff, all the conversations, all the conflicts, all fell away at that point. And what was there was clarity. What was there was spaciousness. And that felt great. It just felt great. So happiness in that sense, and joy in that sense, you know, where you're just contented and at ease and happy with the experience you're having. And at that point, you're not necessarily wanting anything else. That was the thing about that experience. I realized, I don't need anything else right now. This is enough, what I'm experiencing now. And of course, I'm not saying that one shouldn't strive for things and work towards things. I've done a lot of that in my life as well. But I recognise that letting go of confusion, that sort of letting go of, you know, narratives, stories, the past, worrying about the future, that in itself is deeply fulfilling, and there's a joy in that. But one has to cultivate it. Yeah. Because, you know, as I said, it was the very last meditation of the retreat. So all the other meditations before that, you know, it was dealing with the stuff.
Yeah, which might have laid the foundation for that experience. Yeah. I really love what you say about the feeling of a deep inner smile. It's such a beautiful image, and it does make me think of the Buddha. Something golden about the experience. Yeah.
Well, it's interestingly, because I don't think I necessarily connected to the images of the Buddha. There were images of the Buddha that were on the retreat, and I wouldn't say I was drawn to them particularly. No. But when I had this experience of the smile, I thought of the Buddha's smile. I thought, that's why this figure's smiling. Yeah. It's coming from this. It's coming from this a very spacious, wise, knowing, connected, deeply interconnected place. And you cannot do anything but smile if that's one's experience.
Can I ask you something about smiling and suffering? Because I could imagine some people might think, how can we smile? Yeah. And like how dare we cultivate joy when there's so much suffering in the world, and especially at this time, you know, people are dying. So sort of like how, I don't know why, it's sort of like how sometimes we think we need to suffer alongside other people.
Yeah, that was definitely what I grew up with, you know, that, you know, to show your sort of care, you had to, suffer alongside people, really. But I don't know. I mean, I think for me, I really had to think, well, who's that helping? Is that helping the person who's suffering, actually? I think what we need to do, with my experience, if I'm suffering, I'm helped by empathy. I'm helped by people really showing an interest. I'm helped by people offering support in whatever way. So in that sense, you know, it's what we need is solidarity. What we need is people to feel like they're standing alongside us. But I don't need somebody else to suffer alongside me. In fact, their suffering sometimes doesn't help me because I need them to be strong. When I'm in that place, I need somebody else to be willing to be with me, stand with me, in solidarity with me, and then be strong, be clear, be confident, be positive. So for me, that's what, you know, we're also doing. Because at a time when I might be suffering, you might not be.
Yeah.
And so you're holding that possibility, you're holding the reminder of another perspective, another way of being. And it reminds me of what I have that right now I might not be in contact with. Because of my set of conditions of what's going on with me. So I need other people to be positive. But doing that in solidarity with me. So it's not like, well, I'm all right. I'm really all right. Sorry about your difficult situation, but I'm all right. It's not that. It is, I'm with you. I understand. I can connect with what's happening, or I'd like to connect with what's happening with you. I understand there's suffering here. What can I do to help? And but reminding me that that's not all of my experience either. Because things change. That's the thing about the Buddhist teachings. There's always change. But when you're in a state of suffering, we lose perspective on that. Naturally, because we're absorbed in trying to deal with the situation we're in. So I need people to remind me that there's always change. And that things arise in dependence on conditions, different kind of conditions bring things into being. So it's good to be reminded of that as well, because it's kind of like, okay, things will pass, and nothing is stuck. There's always change that we can make. There's always new conditions we can bring about. But sometimes we need support for that.
And other people need to hold that perspective for us sometimes.
And for me as well, you know, with loss, with death, for example, it's one of those where that is a reality. We're having to deal with that. There's nothing. We can't change that. But for me as well, like I went to a funeral just a month ago of a friend of mine, and it was an unexpected death. But she'd said to everybody that she wanted us, before she died, she wanted us all to wear really bright colours. Because she had a full life. She'd had a full life. She'd loved lots of people. Lots of people loved her. She wanted to not just be remembered by the difficult end. She wanted to also for us to reconnect with all of who she was. And so us wearing different colours and bringing out that joyful aspect at her funeral was a way to bring in more of who she was. Because one of the things that happens, I think, is that when we're in a state of suffering, we do identify with that difficult experience. It becomes all of who we are. But it's not all of who we are. And when somebody dies, has a difficult end, as she did, a sort of sudden end, that's what's in your mind often. But it was great that she said that to us, because it meant that, oh yes, actually, people were joking and laughing about all the various experiences they had with her, and she became much more than her untimely death.
That's great, isn't it? In a way that even in something tragic and really sad, there can still be celebration in a way. There can still be joy. It doesn't have to rule it out, and you can still feel the poignancy of the loss, and hold a bigger perspective as well. You don't become unfeeling when you hold a bigger perspective. Absolutely,
and I think meditation and with the teachings is so helpful in that respect, because when you meditate, you're aware of a range of different feelings. A range of different feelings can come into view. So one learns to kind of go, actually, right now there is joy, there is contentment, but there's also some poignancy, there's also some pain, there's also some conflict. You learn to hold the two together. And then that's amazing for me, because I think, gosh, how multifaceted we are as human beings, how complex we are as human beings, and how we can hold much more than we think.
And have you learned that for yourself, becoming the chair of the Buddhist Centre? you have to. I mean, the Buddhist Centre, it's a big thing, actually. There's lots of things going on. It's a complex place, and especially since coronavirus, we've had a lot of challenges, haven't we? That we've. So, have you learnt more about your capacities through?
Well, in a way, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I didn't expect to be the chair of the London Buddhist Centre at all. It wasn't something I planned or envisioned for myself. And when I did become chair, I didn't know what it was going to be like, the role. So I knew there were some things I'd enjoy about it. There were some things I suspected would be challenging, because it's part of being a chair. You're sort of the chair of the board of the trustees, so you're guiding it really as an organisation. You're also like the CEO, or helping the operations, and you're also the sort of spiritual sort of guide. So there's a lot of hats in and of itself. So I knew there were some things I would enjoy. There knew some things that might be quite complex, because every time an organisation always needs to evolve, and I was the first, as you know, woman. Black chair, so that already was going to create some kind of interesting sort of conversations there. Yeah. So I didn't know. Some things I suspected would be challenging, and other things I knew I looked forward to. I think I see it as a spiritual practice. Ultimately, being a chair is a spiritual practice, and for me to actually fulfil all those roles, I have to grow.
Yeah,
I have to grow. I have to discover what I'm, more of me. I have to meet the situations that arise with metta, with loving kindness, with mindfulness, and as a result, I will come up against my existing limits, and I will come up against, my ideas of who I think I am. So sometimes I've definitely, early on I'd be like, I can't deal with that. I just had that thought in my mind. I'm like, what? Why can't you? Well, who's saying that? And it was like, oh, that's just a limitation. That's just a limited view. And now the journey is, okay, now you're going to discover who you have to be to respond to that particular situation. I enjoy that, actually. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy at all, and those who know me well will know that, but I enjoy the challenge of it, and I enjoy the fact that you're in a situation, like a crucial situation, where you, in order to meet it well, fully, lovingly, I have to grow, and that's the gift of the role. It's a gift. It's a challenge, and it's a gift, and it's one I'm happy to hold at the moment. If I felt that I'm not able to rise to that, then maybe that's the time for it to be given to somebody else. But at the moment, I feel like whilst I'm growing in it, I'm still able to do it.
Yeah, wonderful, and thank you for doing it. Really, really, we're benefiting. Yeah, so on the back of that, you have this responsibility at the Buddhist Centre, which is quite sort of, it's quite forward-facing, isn't it? And you meet with lots of different people. And at the same time, you're a mother, you go back home, I could imagine there's also much more mundane tasks that you need to engage with. Less glamorous tasks. Not that being the chair of the obviously is all glamour, but you know what I mean. And I was just wondering if you could say something about, you talked about this, you've talked about this really beautiful, deep experience that you had quite early on in your sort of Buddhist career. And I just wondered about what you do in your daily life, like daily reflections that you have, or ways that you approach your life that help you stay in touch with that deep inner smile.
Well, I love meditation, so that is key, really. I've built up my meditation practice over time. So I remember that first retreat, you know, I came back and was able to practice by myself for the first time after that retreat, you know, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, you know, sort of build it up.
Yeah.
And so now my practice, you know, a few decades on, is a, you know, it's a really strong core. So I do aim to wake up early, and I will give the time to meditation. And I also do moving meditation as well. So I'll do my formal practices. I do 2 different practices I do in the morning. And then I will do moving meditation in the form of yoga as well. And that takes up quite a while in my mornings. But it's such an enjoyable experience. I'm not saying that I always have blissful experiences. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the process of discovery, the process of learning about what's going on in one's, you know, internal world, the process of applying the reflections and the teachings to one's experience. It always, I think I very rarely have an experience. I think I'm not learned something. I'm not experiencing something opening up. So that is my mornings. And I love doing it. You know, since lockdown, I have been, you know, getting up particularly early and really, you know, connecting with the elements as well. So loving the stars in the morning and the moon, and then seeing dawn, you know, and sunbreak, you know, just even that is really, you know, it makes me feel part of the whole universe. And once I've done that in the mornings, then I'm like, okay, now I've got the details of my day to kind of navigate. But that's the sort of bedrock, really, or that's the framing. That's the frame I have within which I deal with the details of my day. And of course, it's mundane. I cook. I do a bit of cleaning. You know, I attend meetings. I meet with people. I write things. You know, so it's the usual kind of working kind of things, really. But the context is teachings. You know, that all things change. The context is opportunities for connection and metta, loving kindness. The context is for clarity, for growth. So for me, I guess that's what goes through my mind, regardless of what the details of what I'm doing is you know, is metta, mindfulness, growth, healing sometimes, connection, letting go. You know, there's always opportunities in one's life for that.
Yeah.
Every day, every moment.
Yeah, because it's so easy just to have a to-do list and think, right, I've just got to get through this, and then once I've done everything, then I'll relax. Then I'll do something that's really nourishing for myself.
Yes, then you'll relax, then you'll feel okay, you know, then I feel worthwhile. You know, that my life's meant something. For me, I try to engage with all the events, you know, from a position of, okay, you know, because I can have resistance like everybody else. I've got a meeting coming up and I'm like, oh, this might be a tricky meeting, might have to talk about a few difficult things. But then I do bring to mind the people and, you know, just... I often bring people to mind, whoever I'm meeting in the day or whatever I'm engaging with, I often bring them to mind in my morning meditation as well. And really imagine them happy, imagine them positive, imagine people connecting. And so when I do have the meeting, then I've got that perspective. So I've got the details that we're going to talk about, and then I've got the perspective of they want to grow and they want to be happy and they want to be free of suffering. Just like me, and they want to be clear, just like me. So that can positively affect how I interact. And obviously, if I'm not doing that, because sometimes, you know, I'm not always mindful, I'm not always clear, but, you know, so when one's not, then I notice how painful that is. You know, I think, oh, actually, why didn't we connect? Why was did I forget X or Y? You know, and I noticed that. And so there's an opportunity during the day where I can just pause and just take that in. ideally, you know, when my day works really well is I have another moment in the end of the day where I then can just, you know, sort of really connect with myself and review the day. So I try and review the day as well, with that in mind. One of the things, reflections I have sometimes in the morning is, you know, if this was my last day on earth, you know, how would I spend it? That's a really interesting reflection because, you know, you might have the long to-do list, but you know it's not about, well, I'd get to the end of my to-do list. That wouldn't be an achievement.
I fed the cat, then I'm gone.
It would not be that. But it would be, I appreciated the person I was with and I expressed that. It would be, I really appreciated the meal I had and I enjoyed the meal I had. It would be, I went for a walk and I connected to my breath and I heard the bird and I heard the trees and I smiled at that woman. And, you know, it would be those kind of experiences, that savouring of the moment and of whatever was arising in that moment. And yeah, having mindfulness and a sense of connection. So that's quite an interesting reflection to have sometimes, that I bring to mind.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, so just one last question. So this is going out on Christmas Day. So let's say something about Christmas. So I just wanted to ask, well, how are you going to be spending Christmas? What does it sort of mean to you as a Buddhist?
Well, how am I going to spend it? Our plans have just changed because of the new lockdown. Yeah. So I had a plan, which was all the family coming together, but that's probably not going to happen now. Yeah. So I'll probably spend it simply with one or two of my, you know, relatives, and I'll cook. I enjoy cooking, so I'll be cooking, and just really connecting, really, quite simply in that way. For me, it's about just coming together with people that you have a connection with, and that hopefully you enjoy that connection that you have. Sometimes it's not always that as well, but I fortunately enjoy the connections I have, so that's positive. It's coming together, and it's just stepping back as well from busyness. That's the whole Christmas period. Stepping back from the busyness of things and renewing oneself and nourishing oneself so that we can go into the new year, you know, a little bit light, a little bit rested. Yeah. Rested and connected, and then be able to look forward. But I think one of the things we've learned this year that we looking forward is challenging.
Can't look forward too far ahead.
Can't look forward too far ahead. Yeah. I think we can have our visions. I think that's very important to have a vision and what's essentially most important. So I think many of us have discovered this year that essentially what's most important isn't necessarily the details of the activities we do, but it is the kind of growth, it is the connection, it is the learning. It is the communication, the well-being. So, you know, I'll be bearing all of that in mind going into the new year.
That's great. That's a really good place to end. Thank you, Suryagupta.
Well, thank you. Interesting questions.
Yeah, great conversation.
And it's lovely to be here. And thanks to Guillaume as well, behind the camera. Yeah. Just lovely to have this conversation with you before we have our break here.
Yeah, really, really good. And you'll see more of us after Christmas. We're going to be both on the online winter retreat, so it'll be lovely to see you there. We'll both be there.
Great. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.